The scorching New Mexico sun beat down mercilessly on Sarah McKenna's shoulders as she made her way through the cottonwood grove toward the Rio Grande. Her worn leather boots crunched on the dried leaves scattered along the narrow path, and sweat beaded on her brow despite the shade provided by the ancient trees. The water buckets in her hands grew heavier with each step, but the ranch's well had run dry 3 days ago, forcing her to make this dangerous journey to the river. At 24, Sarah had already buried one husband and inherited more responsibility than most women twice her age. Her auburn hair, braided and pinned beneath a faded bonnet, caught glints of sunlight that filtered through the canopy above. The simple brown dress she wore showed the wear of hard labor, mending fences, tending livestock, and fighting to keep the McKenna ranch from falling into the hands of land-hungry neighbors who circled like vultures, waiting for her to fail. The sound of flowing water grew louder as she approached the river's edge, but something else caught her attention, a rhythmic splashing that didn't match the natural cadence of the current. Sarah froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. Apache raiders had been reported in the area just 2 weeks ago, and the territorial governor had issued warnings for all settlers to remain vigilant. Colonel Harrison's cavalry had swept through the territory, leaving behind stories of skirmishes and burned homesteads that kept every rancher awake at night. Crouching behind a massive boulder, she peered through the gap between 2 fallen logs. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. A man sat in the shallow water near the opposite bank, his back turned to her. His long black hair hung loose around his shoulders, cascading like dark silk as he methodically washing it with cupped handfuls of river water. Even from her hiding place, she could see the powerful muscles of his shoulders and back, marked by what appeared to be fresh wounds, some still seeping, others forming angry red scars that spoke of recent battles. He was Apache. There was no mistaking the traditional leather clothing folded neatly on the bank beside him, decorated with intricate beadwork that caught the light, or the distinctive war paint still visible on his arms despite his efforts to wash. A rifle lay within arm's reach, its barrel gleaming dully in the filtered sunlight. Sarah knew she should retreat immediately, make her way back to the ranch, and alert the territorial authorities. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to put as much distance as possible between herself and this dangerous stranger, but she couldn't move. Something about the man's careful, almost reverent way of tending to himself held her transfixed. His movements spoke of pain, not just physical, but something deeper, more profound. As he lifted his arms to wring out his hair, she glimpsed more scars along his ribs and shoulder blade. These weren't the random marks of accident or mishap. They formed a pattern, telling a story of battles fought and survived, of a warrior who had faced death and lived to carry its marks. The warrior suddenly stiffened, as if sensing her presence. His head turned slightly, not quite looking in her direction, but alert nonetheless, like a wild animal catching an unfamiliar scent. Sarah held her breath, pressing herself flatter against the boulder's rough surface. The man's profile came into view, high cheekbones that could have been carved from stone, a strong jaw, and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of too much experience for someone who appeared no older than herself. "I know you are there," he said softly, his English clear but accented with the musical cadence of his native tongue. "I mean no harm to you." Sarah's pulse raced like a startled deer's. Every fiber of her being told her to flee, but something in his voice, a weariness that matched her own, a loneliness that echoed in her soul, kept her rooted in place. Slowly, trembling slightly, she rose from her hiding spot, her hands raised to show she carried no weapon, save for the small knife at her belt. "I'm just here for water," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded, despite the fear coursing through her veins. "I didn't mean to intrude on your bathing." The man turned fully to face her, and she saw his eyes clearly for the first time. Dark brown, almost black, but with flecks of amber that caught the dappled sunlight filtering through the cottonwood leaves. A jagged scar ran from his left temple to his jawline, while another crossed his collarbone like a badge of honor. Despite his wounds, or perhaps because of them, he possessed a dignity that made her forget, momentarily, that she was supposed to fear him. "The water belongs to no one," he replied, gesturing toward the river with a slight nod. "Take what you need, I will not stop you." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other across the flowing water. Two people who should have been enemies, frozen in a moment of unexpected understanding. The cottonwoods whispered overhead, their leaves rustling secrets in the warm breeze, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out. But the world seemed to have narrowed to just this place, This encounter between strangers from different worlds. Sarah took a tentative step forward, then another until she reached the water's edge. The warrior watched her but made no move to leave or to threaten. Instead, he seemed as curious about her as she was about him. She knelt beside the river, dipping her first bucket into the cool current, acutely aware of his presence just 30 feet away across the flowing water. "Have you come alone?" he observed, his voice carrying easily over the gentle sound of the river. "This is dangerous for a woman." "Everything is dangerous these days," Sarah replied, not looking up from her task. "Staying home is dangerous. Coming for water is dangerous. Being a woman alone is dangerous." She filled the second bucket, the weight of it making her arms ache. "I don't have much choice in the matter." The warrior studied her with those penetrating dark eyes. "You are the widow McKenna. I have heard the men in town speak of you." Sarah's head snapped up, water dripping from her fingers as she gripped the bucket handle tighter. "You've been in town." The idea of this Apache warrior walking among the settlers sent a chill down her spine. Not from fear for herself, but fear for him. That's incredibly foolish. They'd kill you on sight. A ghost of a smile crossed his scarred features. They would try. He gestured to his wounded torso. "Some already have tried. Those wounds." Sarah found herself stepping closer to the water's edge, her eyes tracing the angry red lines that marked his copper skin. "They're recent. From cavalry soldiers? From men who see only what they fear, not who stands before them." His voice carried no bitterness, only a weary acceptance that made Sarah's chest tighten. "My name is Aiyana. It means eternal blossom in my tongue, though I think my mother had different hopes for what I would become." Sarah hesitated. Sharing names made this real, made him a person rather than a faceless enemy. But looking at him, really looking at him, she realized she had already crossed that line the moment she chose not to flee. "Sarah," she said quietly, "and those men, they were wrong about what they saw." Aiyana tilted his head, studying her face with an intensity that made heat rise in her cheeks. "You are not what I expected either, Sarah McKenna. The stories say you are hard as desert stone, cold as winter wind. They do not mention the sadness in your green eyes." "I'm not sad," Sarah protested, though even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. "I'm practical. Sadness is a luxury I can't afford." "We tell ourselves many things to survive," Aiyana said, rising slowly from the water. Sarah tried not to notice the way droplets traced paths down his chest, or how the muscles in his arms flexed as he reached for a cloth to dry himself. But the heart knows its own truth. Sarah forced herself to look away, focusing on securing the lids on her water buckets. "The heart is foolish. It leads people to make dangerous choices. Like speaking to an Apache warrior by the river." She met his gaze again, finding challenge and something else, hope, in his expression. "Like that, yes." Aiyana pulled on his buckskin shirt, the soft leather molding to his still damp skin. "I should go. My presence here puts you in danger." "Wait." The word escaped before Sarah could stop it. Aiyana paused, one moccasin already on his foot. "Your wounds, some of them are festering. Without proper care, they'll poison your blood. This is not your concern." "Maybe not, but..." Sarah struggled with words for the strange pull she felt toward this man who should be her enemy. "My husband was a doctor before he became a rancher. I learned much about treating injuries. Those bullet wounds need cleaning with carbolic acid, and that gash on your shoulder needs stitching." Aiyana's eyes narrowed. "Why would you help me? Your people and mine are at war." Sarah lifted her chin, meeting his suspicious gaze with determination she didn't entirely feel. "Because right now you're not Apache and I'm not white. Right now you're just a person who's hurt, and I'm someone who can help." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the murmur of water over stones and the distant call of a meadowlark. Finally, Aiyana nodded slowly. "There is an old shepherd's cabin 2 miles upstream, hidden in the canyon. It has been abandoned for many seasons. If you truly wish to help..." He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "I will be there when the sun reaches its highest point tomorrow." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Meeting him once by accident was one thing. Seeking him out deliberately was quite another. "I don't know if I can..." "I understand," Aiyana said, shouldering his rifle and gathering his belongings. "Fear is wise. Trust is dangerous." He started to turn away, then looked back. "But sometimes, Sarah McKenna, dangerous is the only path to something worth having." He melted into the cottonwood shadows with a silence that seemed almost supernatural, leaving Sarah alone by the river, with her buckets of water and a decision that could change everything. As she began the long walk back to her ranch, she found herself already calculating what medical supplies she could gather without arousing suspicion, and wondering if she had the courage to follow through on this impossible, dangerous act of compassion. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and copper that reminded her, despite herself, of Aiyana's skin in the dappled sunlight. Sarah spent the night tossing restlessly in her narrow bed, alternating between determination to help the wounded warrior and terror at what she was contemplating. By dawn, she had made her decision, or perhaps her heart had made it for her. She gathered medical supplies from her late husband's chest: carbolic acid, clean bandages, a needle and catgut thread, and laudanum for pain. Each item she tucked into her saddlebags felt like evidence of a crime she hadn't yet committed. The ride to the canyon took her through rugged terrain that few settlers dared to traverse. Red stone walls rose on either side like ancient sentinels, and the narrow trail wound between boulders that could hide a dozen Apache warriors. Sarah's mare, Belle, picked her way carefully over loose stones, her ears pricked forward nervously. The sun climbed steadily overhead, and by the time Sarah spotted the weathered cabin tucked into a grove of stunted pines, sweat had soaked through her simple blue dress, despite the canyon's shade. Aiyana emerged from the cabin's doorway as she dismounted, moving with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to silent movement. In the daylight, away from the river's concealment, he seemed both more dangerous and more vulnerable. His wounds were clearly troubling him. She could see the careful way he held his left shoulder, the slight catch in his breathing that spoke of pain. "You came," he said simply, and Sarah heard surprise in his voice. "I said I would." She tied Belle's reins to a scrub oak and retrieved her saddlebags. Though I've been questioning my sanity since yesterday, the cabin's interior was sparse but clean. Someone, Aiyana, she assumed, had swept away years of dust and debris. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the chinked walls, creating patterns of light and shadow on the packed earth floor. A small fire crackled in the stone hearth, and water heated in a battered pot. "Remove your shirt," Sarah said, then felt heat flood her cheeks at how forward the words sounded. "I need to see the extent of your injuries." Aiyana complied without self-consciousness, revealing the full map of violence written across his torso. Sarah had to steel herself not to gasp. 3 bullet wounds, 2 knife cuts, and countless smaller abrasions painted his skin in shades of red and purple. The worst was a deep gash along his collarbone that had been crudely stitched with sinew but was showing signs of infection. "This is going to hurt," she warned, soaking a clean cloth in the carbolic solution. "Pain and I are old companions," Aiyana replied, settling back against the cabin wall. "Do what you must." Sarah began with the infected wound, cleaning away the crude stitching with gentle but firm movements. Aiyana's jaw tightened, but he made no sound even when she had to probe deeply to remove fragments of cloth and debris. His stoicism impressed her. Thomas, her late husband, had complained bitterly about far lesser injuries. "How did this happen?" she asked, trying to distract both of them from the intimacy of her ministrations. "A cavalry patrol caught me near Fort Stanton. I was gathering information about troop movements." His eyes met hers. "I know how that sounds to you." Sarah paused in her cleaning. "You're a scout for war parties." "I am a protector of my people," Aiyana said quietly, "just as your cavalry protects yours. The methods may differ, but the purpose is the same." "My people aren't your enemy," Sarah protested, then immediately regretted the words. "I mean, not all of us." "No?" Aiyana's voice held no accusation, only weary curiosity. "Tell me, Sarah McKenna, when was the last time you saw an Apache child playing in your town? When did you last break bread with one of my people in friendship?" Sarah had no answer. She continued her work in silence, cleaning and rebandaging each wound with practiced efficiency. As she worked, she found herself studying his face when she thought he wasn't looking. Despite the harsh lines that pain and conflict had carved there, she could see traces of the young man he must have been, perhaps still was, beneath the warrior's exterior. "Your husband," Aiyana said suddenly. "He died in the war." "Fever," Sarah replied, threading her needle. "This is going to be the worst part." She positioned the needle at the edge of the infected wound. "He caught it from a patient. Thomas always said a doctor's greatest enemy wasn't bullets or knives, but the invisible things that killed just as surely." Aiyana was quiet as she began stitching, his breathing controlled and steady. Finally, he spoke. "You loved him." It wasn't a question, but Sarah answered anyway. "Yes, but not the way I thought love should be. Thomas was kind, gentle, safe. Marrying him made sense. She tied off the last stitch and began bandaging the wound. I've recently learned that some kinds of sense can leave a person feeling very alone. Their eyes met, and Sarah felt something shift between them, an acknowledgement of loneliness recognized and understood. Without thinking, she reached up to trace the scar along his temple with her fingertips. Aiyana went perfectly still under her touch. "Who did this to you?" she whispered. "A soldier who thought he was protecting his family from a savage." Aiyana's voice was soft, without bitterness. "I do not blame him. Fear makes monsters of us all." Sarah's hand lingered against his cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin, the slight roughness of stubble. "I'm not afraid of you." "You should be," Aiyana murmured, but his own hand came up to cover hers. "Not because I would harm you, but because this, whatever grows between us, it will bring pain to us both." Sarah knew he was right. She also knew she was past caring. Some pain is worth bearing. The silence that fell between them was charged with possibility and danger in equal measure, the cabin walls seeming to close around them like a cocoon, separating them from the outside world and all its harsh realities. For 3 weeks, Sarah found reasons to visit the canyon. Each time she told herself it was merely to check on Aiyana's healing progress, but the truth was far more complicated. His wounds were mending well under her care, but something else was growing between them, something that defied the boundaries of race, culture, and the bitter war that raged across the territory. They talked for hours in the cabin's sanctuary, sharing stories of their vastly different childhoods. Aiyana spoke of learning to track deer through snow-covered mountains, of ceremonies where his grandfather taught him the old ways. Sarah described her life back east before coming to New Mexico, her struggle to adapt to the harsh frontier after Thomas's death. In these moments, the outside world ceased to exist. "My grandmother used to say that some souls are born knowing each other," Aiyana said one afternoon as they sat by the cabin's window. His shirt was off again while Sarah changed his bandages, but the wounds were nearly healed now. She said such souls would find each other across any distance, through any obstacle. Sarah's hand stilled on the clean bandage she was wrapping around his ribs. "That sounds like something my mother would have called foolish, romantic nonsense." "Perhaps. But when I see you coming up the canyon trail, something in my chest grows warm that has been cold for many seasons. Tell me that is foolish, and I will believe you." Sarah couldn't meet his eyes. The feelings growing in her heart terrified her, not because Aiyana was Apache, but because they were so much stronger than anything she had ever felt for Thomas. "What we feel doesn't matter. You know that, don't you? This can't lead anywhere good." "Can it not?" Aiyana caught her chin gently, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. "My people have a saying, the heart that loves truly fears nothing. Perhaps it is time to stop being afraid." Before Sarah could respond, the distant thunder of hoofbeats echoed through the canyon. They both froze, listening to the sound growing louder. Sarah quickly moved to the window, peering through a gap in the boards. "Cavalry patrol," she whispered, her blood turning to ice. 6 soldiers coming up the trail. Aiyana was already moving, grabbing his weapons and shirt with fluid efficiency. "They track you here?" "I don't know. I was careful. I always—" Sarah's voice caught in her throat as she recognized the lead rider. "Oh God, it's Lieutenant Morrison. He's been courting me, pressuring me to marry him. If he finds us together, he will kill me and ruin you," Aiyana finished grimly. He was dressed now, checking his rifle with practiced movements. "There is a back trail through the rocks. I can—" "No." Sarah's voice was firm. "They'll see your tracks. Follow you. You're still not fully healed." Her mind raced through possibilities, all of them dangerous. The root cellar. There's a hidden entrance under the floorboards. They worked together frantically, pulling up the concealed boards to reveal a small underground chamber that had once stored the shepherd's winter provisions. Aiyana dropped down into the cramped space just as the horses reached the cabin clearing. "Sarah!" Lieutenant Morrison's voice boomed outside. "Sarah McKenna, are you in there?" Sarah smoothed her skirts, checked her reflection in a broken mirror fragment, and opened the cabin door with what she hoped was a surprised expression. "Lieutenant Morrison, what brings you all the way out here?" Morrison dismounted, his pale blue eyes sweeping over her with possessive intensity. He was a tall man in his 30s, with the kind of bland handsomeness that had never stirred Sarah's pulse. His uniform was immaculate despite the dusty ride, and his mustache was waxed to precise points. "I might ask you the same question," he said, stepping closer than propriety dictated. "This is dangerous country for a woman alone. There have been Apache sightings in this area. I come here sometimes to think, Sarah replied, forcing herself not to step back. It's peaceful. Was peaceful anyway. Morrison's men were already spreading out, searching the area with military precision. Sarah's heart hammered as she watched one soldier examine the ground near where Aiyana's horse had been grazing during previous visits. "Lieutenant," the soldier called out, "fresh horse tracks here. 2 different animals." Morrison's expression hardened. "2 horses? But you only have 1 mount, Sarah." I don't know about any other tracks." Sarah fought to keep her voice steady. "Perhaps another traveler stopped here recently. Or perhaps," Morrison said, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper, "you've been entertaining company you shouldn't. There are rumors in town, Sarah. Ugly rumors about a certain widow who's been seen riding alone in Apache territory." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Sarah lifted her chin defiantly. "Since when is it a crime for a woman to ride her own land? When that woman might be consorting with savages?" Morrison grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. "I've been patient with you, Sarah, more patient than most men would be with a stubborn widow. But my patience has limits. Let go of me." Sarah tried to pull away, but Morrison's grip tightened. "You need a husband's protection. My protection. These foolish notions of independence will get you killed, or worse." His eyes glittered with a mixture of desire and anger. "I'm prepared to overlook whatever indiscretions you may have committed, but only if you agree to marry me. Now." From beneath the floorboards came the faintest creak of wood. Sarah's blood froze, but Morrison seemed not to notice. She had to get him away from the cabin before Aiyana was discovered. "I need time to consider your generous proposal," she said, forcing honey into her voice. "Surely a decision of such importance deserves proper thought." Morrison studied her face suspiciously, then nodded slowly. 2 days, Sarah. 2 days to come to your senses. After that, he didn't finish the threat, but his meaning was clear. As the patrol mounted up and rode away, Sarah remained standing in the cabin doorway until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Only then did she rush back inside to help Aiyana climb out of his hiding place. "You heard?" she asked. Aiyana nodded grimly. "Every word. He will not give up easily, this soldier who desires you. Morrison is the least of our problems now. If there are rumors—" Sarah sank into a chair, the full implications washing over her. "They'll be watching me. We can't meet like this anymore." "No," Aiyana agreed, his voice heavy with resignation. "We cannot." He moved to the window, gazing out at the canyon that had been their sanctuary. "Perhaps it is better this way. This path we walk leads only to pain." But even as he spoke the words, Sarah could see in his eyes the same anguish that tore at her own heart. They had found something precious in this hidden place, something that transcended the hatred between their peoples. Now that sanctuary was shattered, and they faced an impossible choice between love and survival. 2 days passed like a lifetime. Sarah went through the motions of ranch work, feeding cattle, mending fences, tending her small garden, but her mind was consumed with thoughts of Aiyana and the impossible choice before her. Morrison's deadline loomed like a storm cloud, and she knew he wouldn't accept refusal gracefully. Worse, she feared what he might do if he discovered the truth about her canyon meetings. On the evening of the 2nd day, as purple shadows lengthened across the desert, Sarah made her decision. She saddled Belle one last time and rode toward the canyon, not to the cabin but to a high ridge where she and Aiyana had agreed to meet if circumstances prevented their usual rendezvous. The wind was picking up, carrying the scent of rain from distant mountains and the promise of an autumn storm. Aiyana was waiting for her, silhouetted against the darkening sky like a figure from legend. His wounds had healed completely, leaving only the newest scars to join the collection that marked his warrior's body. In the fading light, he looked magnificent and heartbreakingly remote. "You should not have come," he said, as she dismounted. "Morrison's soldiers patrol these hills now, searching for sign of Apache presence. I had to see you." Sarah moved close enough to touch him, but kept her hands at her sides. "I've made my choice." Something flickered in Aiyana's dark eyes. Hope, fear, resignation. "Tell me." "I can't marry Morrison. I won't." The words came out in a rush. "I'd rather face whatever consequences come than bind myself to a man I don't love, could never love. And us?" Aiyana's voice was carefully neutral. "What of us, Sarah?" Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of an impossible decision. "I love you, God help me, I love you in a way I never thought possible. But love isn't enough, is it? Not when the cost would be so high." "Speak plainly," Aiyana said, though she could hear the pain building in his voice. "If we continue this, people will die. Morrison will hunt you down, and others like him. My neighbors will turn against me, maybe burn my ranch, drive me from the territory. Your people will see you as a traitor, consorting with the enemy." Sarah's voice broke. "And children? How could we bring children into a world that would hate them for existing?" Aiyana was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the vast landscape spread below them. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. "My grandmother once told me that the greatest act of love is sometimes letting go." I did not understand her meaning then. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that you are right, and it destroys me to admit it." Aiyana turned to face her fully, his scarred features etched with pain. "This love we have found, it is real, it is true, but it belongs to a different world than the one we must live in." Sarah felt tears she had been holding back for days finally spill over. "So we just end it? Pretend these weeks never happened?" "No." Aiyana stepped closer, reaching up to cup her face in his hands. "We honor what we have shared. We carry it with us as proof that love can exist even between enemies, that hearts can touch across any divide. And perhaps," his voice grew soft with desperate hope, "perhaps someday, when the wars are over and the hatred has faded, our peoples will remember what we learned here." Sarah leaned into his touch, memorizing the feel of his hands on her skin, the warmth in his eyes despite the sorrow there. "I wish I could be braver. I wish I could fight the whole world for you." "You are the bravest woman I have ever known," Aiyana said fiercely. "It would be easy to run away together, to think only of ourselves, to stay and face what comes, to protect our peoples from the consequences of our love. That takes courage I am not sure I possess." Thunder rumbled overhead, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Sarah knew this was goodbye, knew that when she rode down from this ridge she would be riding out of Aiyana's life forever. The knowledge felt like a physical wound. "What will you do?" she asked. "Return to my people. Try to counsel peace when I can, fight when I must." Aiyana's thumb traced away a tear from her cheek. "And you?" "Rebuild. Find a way to refuse Morrison without bringing his wrath down on innocent people. Maybe—" Sarah took a shaky breath. "To maybe try to be a bridge between our worlds, even if I can never cross it myself." The storm was building in earnest now, lightning flickering in the distance. They had only moments before the downpour would force them to seek shelter or risk exposure. "Sarah," Aiyana said urgently, "know this, in another life, in a different world, I would have spent every day trying to be worthy of your love." "You already are," Sarah whispered. "You always were." They kissed then, fierce and desperate and full of all the love they would never be able to express again. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, clinging to each other as the rain began to fall in earnest. "Go," Aiyana said, his voice rough with emotion, "before the storm traps us here and we lose what courage we have found." Sarah mounted Belle with hands that shook, looking down at Aiyana one last time. In the lightning's flash, he looked like something from a dream, beautiful, dangerous, and forever beyond her reach. "Goodbye," she said simply. "Until we meet in a better world," Aiyana replied. Sarah rode home through the storm, tears mixing with rain on her face. Behind her, she heard the distant sound of hoofbeats heading in the opposite direction, Aiyana returning to his people, taking with him the other half of her heart. 3 months later, Lieutenant Morrison would accept a transfer to California, frustrated by Sarah McKenna's continued refusal of his suit. The Apache wars would rage for another decade before peace finally came to the territory, and Sarah would build her ranch into one of the most successful in New Mexico, known for her fair treatment of all people, regardless of race or origin, carrying Aiyana's memory like a secret flame that would burn in her heart until her dying day. Some loves, she learned, were too powerful to be contained by the world as it existed, but that didn't make them any less real or any less worth the pain of letting them go.